What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Fourth and Frames, the first fantasy football podcast here at fantasyandframes.com, the flagship, the redraft pod, whatever you want to call it. We are here with you today to talk some shop. I'm your host, Jorge Edwards. You can find me on Twitter at Jorge B. Edwards. And, of course, I got my co-host, Tyler Heil, FF Tyler Heil on Twitter. Tyler, how you doing, man?
Oh, I am wonderful. I'm ready to discuss some plays and fades and see how great and terrible we all did last week.
So, Tyler, I don't know if you saw that stat that has come out over the past few days where they were looking at viewership for Thursday Night Football and how it's been steadily decreasing to now we're in the single digits of people actually watching Thursday Night Football, which it's great news for us. Because we said, you know what, you're not going to be watching Thursday Night Football. You know what you should be watching? You should be watching on the Fantasy and Frames' Facebook feed, Twitter feed, YouTube channel, the Daily Fix podcast live with Keith Fleming and Joe Matz. They have been crushing. And folks, I want to say crushing. They helped win me $100 this past weekend with their picks literally every single week. The research has been fantastic. They do an amazing job with their content. They really work on their craft like nobody's business. And with us this week here on Fourth and Frames, we don't have Nate Markham this week, where he's having fun at the Blues hockey game. Hope you're having a great time, Nate. And we have Keith Fleming, host of the Daily Fix podcast. Keith, how you doing, man?
What's going on, guys? It's been an incredible run for the Daily Fix. Me and Joe, who know obsessive compulsive ness was going to end up being a positive, but apparently it is. And the only thing is, though, our heads have gotten so big that we demanded our own night for the show. So we're becoming divas. But no, we're really excited doing Thursday nights. And the games on Thursday have been, just embarrassingly bad. Do we have any more Russell Wilson Denver Broncos games on Thursdays coming up? I hope not.
I think we're good with primetime games. I think with the Broncos, actually, they had a big fireworks celebration last weekend or the week before.
It's been bad,
but seriously, folks, head over to our Instagram page. Every week, you can get all of the images for all the different plays at your expensive plays, your medium plays, your bargain plays at DFS for DraftKings. We're working on affiliation with Fantasy and Frames and DraftKings, so that way you can click on our links on fantasyandframes.com. You help out the brand, and you also get to use the awesome picks that Joe and Keith give you each and every week for your daily DraftKings lineups. So totally excited for that. Let's get into some news here. It's been, for the most part, it's been kind of quiet. There's been rumblings of things that could potentially happen. So, for example, one thing that jumps to my mind right now is the Kareem Hunt. Everywhere I go on Twitter, every other slide of my thumb, I see Kareem Hunt could be traded for as low as a 4th round pick to a potential team like the Eagles, like whoever else. Tyler, you're the Browns fan here. Is it possible that we've seen one of the last days of Kareem Hunt in Cleveland, or do you think that's just smoke in the air?
I think that's smoke. I don't think he's going to get traded. I think that a team would need to give up something like at least a 4th and a 6th to get him. Reason being, everyone's like, they're just going to lose him. Why wouldn't you get something for him while you can? Listen, there is a thing called compensatory picks due to salary cap and contract value that a lot of people don't understand. Kareem Hunt is going to play into their compensatory pick value, which is why I believe the Browns are a candidate to trade for Daron Payne, because they can re-sign him at no penalty to their compensatory picks. The Rams have been doing this for years. They've been getting 3rd round pick after 3rd round pick after 3rd round pick, because the amount of contracts that they sign are far less than the value of the contracts that players leaving their team sign. And the Browns have people like Jack Conklin, Jadeveon Clowney, and Kareem Hunt that are going into free agency, that are going to get paid, that are going to be big contract values, that is going to factor into their compensatory draft picks. So I have to think that a fourth and a sixth would get it done, but no less than a fourth.
You leave Deron Payne alone. He's happy right here in the nation's capital. We don't need you tampering or tinkering with that. Putting that out there in the universe there, Tyler.
I would be crow hopping a third rounder with the Commanders.
Love it. Next bit of news here. It happened towards the end of last week. I want to say it happened last Thursday. Christian McCaffrey is a 49er. And not only is he a 49er, he comes in and he's used pretty well this past week versus the Kansas City Chiefs. Obviously, it wasn't the rematch of the Super Bowl people were hoping it was going to be. At least that's what the announcers were saying on Sunday. But, McCaffrey he looked like McCaffrey. He just needs to get the volume up there. But coincidentally, they trade him away. Donta Foreman and Chuba Hubbard become the lead running backs in Carolina. Hubbard was actually out touching Foreman before he went out due to injury, I believe. And then Foreman just went on and had another Deonta Foreman day, like he did last year with the Tennessee Titans. Keith, to tie into that, also for the Panthers, DJ Moore lives. PJ Walker for now, exactly. What do we make of? First of all, let's go to San Francisco. I have a lot of shares of Elijah Mitchell that are now worthless. People still,
I'm with you.
People still have Jeff Wilson stock here. Obvious upgrade. But do you think now, with the fact that there are a lot of playmakers on this team, that there's potentially some room or wiggle room for disappointment? Like there are too many mouths to feed? Or do you think this is just a perfect, embarrassment of riches that the 49ers have?
If anybody can figure this out, to his credit, it's Kyle Shanahan. I'm excited to see to me, I want to see the Wildcat with him and Debo. I'm clamoring for it. I mean, if any two guys could bring that back and make it effective, it would be those two dudes. And I believe CMC actually played some quarterback in high school, so he can throw it a little bit, just for the occasional play. But I mean, from a NFL standpoint, I hate it. I would never trade for a running back. I would never pay to get a running back. I believe you draft running backs and you basically use them and then let them go and draft another one. But, for the Niners, I guess they're just saying that they don't want to give up on this season. And I do think it's a better situation, though, for CMC. Obviously, it's a much better offense. You can't have defenses just zoning in on CMC with the other weapons that the Niners have around him. I just don't know with Jimmy G and the level he's been playing if it's really going to make a difference. But I give credit to the Niners if you're a fan, for still trying to make something out of the season and making moves. I wouldn't give up that many draft picks for even a running back of the quality of CMC.
Nope, totally get it. With a bit of injury news here, I'll start with the lesser. I hate saying that, the lesser bit of the injury news, because I don't want to devalue a human being. But Nico Collins, wide receiver of the Houston Texans, head coach Lovie Smith came out today and said they're not entirely sure he's going to go on season-ending IR, but they are heading in that direction, which is unfortunate because he has a really good matchup this week, which we may or may not be talking about another wide receiver here for the Texans. But the big news, for fantasy football managers out there is Breece Hall tore his ACL and then ruptured some of his meniscus on Sunday after he pulled out a 63-yard touchdown out of nowhere to help the Jets, who the Jets have been playing fantastic this year. Words I'd never thought I'd say for the past 30 years.
You're welcome, Jets. The Browns got them off to that start.
But who comes to the rescue here the very next day is James Robinson, whose usage and touches have been decreasing for the Jacksonville Jaguars as Travis Etienne has been going up. The Jets, they employ the zone running scheme that Shanahan did in San Francisco. LaFleur, his brother have been using that in Green Bay. Is it Mike LaFleur? Is it Matt LaFleur? This is Mike LaFleur, I think, in the Jets. It's a LaFleur. I don't know. The point is that they have a, he's not really a dynamic running back. He's more of like a one-cut running back who head coach Robert Saleh was emphasizing the importance of having that style of running back in their offense today. Tyler, James, you had mentioned last hour on the Dynasty 365 pod that you are the Breece Hall manager. Did you make any effort to try and acquire James Robinson, or is he and you could speak to this from a dynasty perspective as well as from a redraft perspective. How much are you trying to reach out and get him from somebody, or is it not even possible at this point?
I mean, not too much. I think he can be productive, but James Robinson is not coming in here to be the lead dog in this backfield. He's coming in here to share time. Michael Carter was splitting time with Breece Hall. You think that James Robinson is going to come in and take over this workload? No, he's going to be in an even split with Michael Carter. I think Robinson will be helpful. He'll be playable, but he's not someone that I'm actively going out to get in redraft or really in dynasty either, because he'll be a free agent after this year.
Gotcha. Sticking with the New York theme, Jerry Jeudy was seen at a New York airport recently, adding fuel to the fire that his tenure in Denver could be over with. Smoke, Keith, or is there anything that people should be making as far as these Jerry Jeudy rumors and the whole trade deadline coming up?
He looked good in a Giants uniform, and I mean they need a wide receiver, so it probably is smoke. I don't really know why the Broncos would punt on a very talented receiver this early, but I mean depending on obviously what they get, why not look into offers? But there's several teams that could use a wide receiver. Looking at you, Green Bay Packers. Looking at you, Los Angeles Rams. There's some good teams that are definitely in need of that. So. I would imagine they're at least kicking the tires on it.
Go ahead, Tyler.
Yeah, I don't really understand why the Broncos would trade him, but I mean, sure, why not?
Yeah, it's exactly. It's like all of a sudden all the turmoil with Russell Wilson and this Broncos team, and now for some reason everybody's tradable. And I'm like, how did this become a news story? How did this become like a thing where everybody has to be tradable after 6 games or 7 games into the season?
Yeah. That line of thinking makes no sense with what they have done. The only thing you can even think of is they made all these moves before the new owners came in. Maybe the new owners came in and said, nah,
yikes.
Yeah. No, you know what? They're saying it with their eyes, because every week when they're in prime time, they always cut to the new owner's box. And I think we were talking about this last week with Bill Mustafa when he was on the show, and the new owners are like, what the hell did we just purchase for billions of dollars? And I guarantee you that's
for paying Russell Wilson how much for how long?
Yeah, exactly. Speaking of Russell Wilson, we have the Broncos and we have the Jaguars is it London or is it just London or
no, it's London. Yeah.
There's a Germany game also, and then there's a Mexico City game, I think, this year, if memory serves me correctly.
I know there's a Germany game. I didn't know for sure if there was a Mexico City game, but yeah.
But thank you. Exactly. Yeah. Going back to the Germany Rhine game, NFL Europe back in the day, NFL Europa when it got rebranded. Anyhow. Aging.
Let me just throw this out there. I just looked at Russell Wilson's contract. Holy crap!
Oh, yeah. It's awful. It is.
Sorry,
bad.
Jorge.
No, I mean it's bad things. Hashtag bad things. But speaking of Russell Wilson and the Broncos taking on the Jaguars, who I feel like the Jaguars are at home when they're in London. I think that's been the case since the Blake Bortles days. He missed last week. Rippon came in. Brett Rippon, is that his? I don't know his name. Yeah, thank you.
Nephew of Mark Rippon.
Nephew of Norbert. Yeah, exactly. I knew the last name. I didn't know the first name, because who really cares? Although I did make a play for him in my dynasty league trying to get him because it's a super flex. And anyhow, that doesn't really matter. The point is that Russell Wilson, and I guess if this is the point that matters, then it's saying something. Russell Wilson was working out on the airplane while everybody was sleeping. He was doing lunges and squats.
Of course he would. You wonder why Marshawn Lynch and those guys hate him. I mean, they freaking hate that guy.
Yeah.
And it just, there's something there. Like I don't want to speak, because I don't know him personally, but I mean, the fact that all these guys, all these dogs from those Seattle Super, they hate that dude, man. Hate him.
It's crazy. And I don't know, Keith, if you saw last week or after the Chargers Broncos Monday night game, they showed a video of everybody walking back to the locker room, and Russell Wilson was kind of like trying to give them like a 5 to like, it's going to be okay. We're going to right the ship. We're going to right the ship. And every single one of them just like walked by. They didn't even like put their hand out to give them. They just were like, get out of my way. Get out. Not good things going on in Denver. Yeah. Elijah Moore, he going to New York, back to New York for the Jets. He wanted out of New York. He got deactivated last week. He's been reactivated now. If you saw the video today during the beginning of practice, the offensive coordinator LaFleur came up to him, gave him a hug and whatnot, and they were very chummy, very buddy. So water under the bridge, or maybe this is just what he needs to do to potentially get traded. Tyler, what does this scream to you?
Well, first of all, trigger warning. I was discussing this with some friends, and I said to them, this is the most Gen Z crap I have ever heard from Elijah Moore. He has 1 month of turmoil in his professional career, and he's like, nah, man, get me out of here. But shut up, man. Go back to work. Anyway.
Yeah, you're not wrong.
Yeah, I don't think he is going to be traded. I don't think he should be traded. I think the Jets probably saw this situation and were like, WTF? I feel like this is a non-story.
That's what I was
It's a
thinking as
bad
well.
look. It's a really bad look. Your team is winning for the first time in almost a decade. And for you to be, it's all about you. I mean, it's almost like, you're a quarterback for a team and you're going out partying on Friday night and then lighting up your offensive lineman on the sideline when you're, down. I mean, it's just, I'm shocked. I mean, I look at and again, not turning this into a Falcons thing, but Kyle Pitts, who I'm sure he's frustrated. Like, he's got to be, right? You haven't heard him complain. I've seen him out, blocking, doing this because, again, the team's competitive. And it's just, it really is. It's sad. Not just, for this generation, but just as a football player. I mean, the ultimate thing, right, is to win. And the Jets are winning. Those guys are gods right now in New York. And it's just really sad to see, him being basically a little bitch.
Mm-hmm. You're not wrong. So it's funny. So in my Scott Fishbowl League, which I'm doing god awful in, there is an actor, Michael Stoyanov, who people may remember from being the older brother on the show Blossom back in the 90s. He was also in The Dark Knight. He was the second clown to get killed in the bank robbery scene in the very beginning of the movie. But very funny guy, awesome guy. And he was a guest of Seth Wilcox, somebody that both Keith and we know very well from In Between Media. And I caught a little bit of their show the other day. And Stoyanov said it perfectly. He's like, why are you in a team sport if that is your mentality? Play in a sport where it's just, you versus the other opponent. Like, if you're going to be in a team sport, this is not the way you should be acting. So who knows what's going on in his head, or more importantly, who he has in his ear, potentially giving him this. So it's craziness. It's all craziness. Speaking of crazy, let's talk about some crazy, awesome things. Speaking of DFS, as we were earlier, Underdog Fantasy. Like I said, we're still working with trying to get the affiliation connection with DraftKings, which we will get fairly soon, knock on wood. But somebody that we are partnered with is Underdog Fantasy. If you use the promo code FRAMES, you get 100% match up to $100. Literally, it's prop bet heaven. Like any type of prop you want to make for a player in a game situation or an individual player's performance, you can do that over there. Literally, they give you and this is like an average, like let's say like to Dak Prescott, they give you like 8 different props for Dak Prescott. All you have to do is wager at a minimum of 3. And, it's literally like easy money winning. It's great. And let's face it, you're listening or you're watching and or both the Fantasy Football Podcast. You're reading all of our content, which you should be over at fantasyandframes.com. You're checking out our Instagram page. You're checking out our Facebook pages, Twitter pages, you name it. We're pumping out tons of content. You're absorbing this content. You're reading, you're watching, you're looking at this content. I'm sure we're not the only people that you're listening to content from. There's a lot of content creators out there. The point is that you are a fantasy football junkie. So if you are going to take the time out of your busy life to be a fantasy football junkie, you might as well put a lot of this information to good use and win you some cash, and do so over at Underdog Fantasy. Again, using the promo code FRAMES, you get a 100% match to your first up to $100 on your first deposit. So head over there today. And as we do now, every week, we get into our plays and fades segment. We cut right to the chase. We tell you in season who we're confident about, who we're not confident about, and how we go about this is very simple. So when we're talking about offensive production, we're talking about half PPR scoring because we like to appease the PPR crowd, boo, and we like to appease the non-PPR, yay. You may have just heard a little bias of mine right there. That being the case, we're looking at quarterbacks outside the top 12 for our plays. We're looking at running backs and wide receivers outside of the top 24, tight ends outside the top 10. Again, this is for fantasy pros, half PPR, ECR consensus. For our fades, it's the exact opposite. It's play quarterbacks within the top 12, wide receivers and running backs within the top 24, tight ends within the top 10, and half PPR, ECR. And so since we cover IDP on our IDP show, Shoot the Gap, which is now going to be going on at 9 p.m. Eastern on Wednesdays going forward, let's start with our plays at quarterback. And Tyler, you got some quarterbacks for us to talk about this week. Why don't we get into it? Who's somebody, or who are some quarterbacks that you think people should be playing this week?
So the easiest one that I could find was Andy Dalton at quarterback 25, playing at home against the Las Vegas Raiders. The Raiders are giving up the most fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks on the year. They are giving up an average of 23.8 points per game to the quarterback position. I mean, that is a ridiculous number. The Saints still won't have Michael Thomas or Jarvis Landry to kind of bring the value down a bit, but Olave is looking like a star. Alvin Kamara is doing Alvin Kamara things. In the passing game, he's totaled 24 targets over the past 3 weeks. He's averaging over 9 yards per reception. And to add on to that, the Saints committed to Andy Dalton. Jameis is healthy. And Dennis Allen came out and said, nah, we're good. We're going to stick with Andy Dalton.
The Red Rocket, man.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's Red Rifle, isn't it?
Oh, is it Red Rifle?
It's some allusion to something that we probably shouldn't be saying on a PG show, but yes, to answer your question.
I think it's talking about the Christmas Story, man, the Red Rifle.
That makes sense.
No,
Even though they're
right.
making a sequel to Christmas Story, which
Did
I'm
you
like, oh
see
my
that?
God.
Did
Yeah.
you see that?
No.
So to take this off the rails,
Optimistically hopeful.
so to take this off the rails slightly, my father-in-law is a huge Christmas Story junkie. Like, he knows more about the Christmas Story. First of all, there's the house in Cleveland,
I've
and
been
then
there.
there's this.
Have you really?
As have I. We actually stayed for the holidays one night over. We were allowed to actually reserve the house to sleep
wow.
over.
Oh, how cool.
And so we recreated all the scenes where, like, we hid his Red Ryder BB gun around the tree, and it's like, hey, Jerry, you got one more present around the corner. What's that? And so we packed it in the original box, and he got to open it again.
You're going to shoot your eye out.
Exactly. So when I saw last week that they're putting out a sequel to the movie, or another sequel to the movie, there's actually been another movie that didn't.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it wasn't received so well. But the fact that they have this new one coming out, I sent them immediately this. I'm like, oh my God, you got to check this out. Anywho, back to fantasy football.
Sorry, that was my fault.
No, it's cool. It's cool. No, I love the pick with Andy Dalton right here. And it's crazy. Like, you saw Jameis Winston perfectly content. I don't know if he's content, but the coaches are content that he's on the sideline. But here's the thing. You look at Andy Dalton last week against the Cardinals, they were down big, but even when they were still within reach, you saw Dalton have command of the offense of what he had around him, and they moved the ball down the field. So it is, I think, the play and the matchup this week really aligned well. So that's a really good pick there, Tyler.
Absolutely.
In terms of running back, let's go to running back now. Let's talk about a play here. Keith, what do you got for us?
So obviously make sure he's playing, because that is an issue. But it looks like James Conner is going to go. He is currently running back 32. he's missed the last 2.5 games, but for his career, he's played 10 games with DeAndre Hopkins in the lineup, which he is back. He scored 11 touchdowns in those 10 games. The Cardinals are just a better offense in general when Hopkins is in the lineup. It's a huge difference with Kyler Murray when he plays. Connor saw 18 targets and caught 13 passes in his first 4 full starts. He saw 2 or more red zone carries in 3 of those 4 games. And the Vikings have allowed 4 or more receptions to running backs in 5 of their first 6 games. And running backs from opposing teams have scored a touchdown in 4 of 6. I think the Vikings are a really weak 5-1 team. I expect the Cardinals to win this game outright, and I think Connor's going to be a big part of that. And I'm honestly surprised. I'm assuming it's due to the injury, and we're not sure if he's 100% going to play, but it does look like he's leaning toward that. He's running back 32. Connor already this year has had 2 double-digit games, so I really like James Conner as my play at running back.
Nice. 100% agree. I love this play right here for you, Keith. Going to wide receiver, play. I got 2 plays here. Coincidentally, they're both in the same game because both these cornerbacks for the Saints and Texans. Excuse me, not from the same game. I apologize. Let's go. Mac Hollins. Let's go over that. Mac Hollins, wide receiver 58, and I'm going to use some I'm going to use a different strategy here. I'm talking about like IDP first or defensive play first and how that'll tie into offensive production. So Mac Hollins is the right wide receiver for the Las Vegas Raiders. The left cornerback for the Saints is Bradley Roby, who is literally one of the worst rated cornerbacks in all of the NFL. Like, god awful. So the matchup is there. We've seen the development between Hollins and Derek Carr over the course of the season. And what's really beautiful is that Bradley Roby, one of the worst cornerbacks in all the NFL, is targeted on average 13.7 yards down the field. So he is the big play giver. And Mac Hollins is targeted yards per target 16.7 yards down the field. So the big play giver upper and the big play receiver are going to be playing against each other. So give me Mac Hollins at wide receiver 58 to perform well. He's definitely going to get you into the top 36, whether it's a wide receiver 1, 2, or 3/flex. Another player who I see being somebody who's a solid wide receiver 2, who was a solid wide receiver 2 last year, just didn't, just for whatever reason, Brandon Cooks just doesn't get the respect that he deserves, I think. And this week, he's the wide receiver 28. So kudos to Fantasy Pros ECR for getting that part close to right. Both of the top cornerbacks on the Titans are allowing an NFL quarterback rating when targeted of 113.4, which is really good, bad for them, but really good, and 128.5 respectively. The Titans are allowing, on average on the season, 36.3 fantasy points per game to the position. I already mentioned earlier in the show that Nico Collins looks to be out. Brevin Jordan is an afterthought in this offense, which that's probably the hit. That's probably the miss of misses amongst people in redraft and the dynasty community. Brevin Jordan just not being anything fantasy worthy. I'm sure he's something to someone. I'm sure his parents think he's doing
really nice guy.
Really nice guy. Really nice guy. Thank you, Keith.
Class act.
Takes things in stride. There we go.
The anti-Elijah.
Exactly. You don't hear him requesting a trade out of Houston. Exactly. But give me Brandon Cooks this week. Just the target volume is going to be there against a really great matchup against a decrepit Titans secondary. Again, the Titans are allowing 36.3 fantasy points per game to the position. Target volume is going to be in his favor. So give me, a wide receiver who's going to get you 18, 19 points easily, can be a wide receiver 2 for you. And depending on how things work out, because of bye weeks, he may creep into wide receiver 1, low end territory, but more than likely wide receiver 2.
Just remember De'Ami Brown, right? That's what I always tell people, Jorge, when I talk about the Titans secondary. De'Ami Brown, 2 catches, 100 yards. Unbelievable. That's how bad they are.
Yep. That's all you need to know about the Titans right there. Which, by the way, that was Keith is alluding to. Joe Matz, his co-host of the Daily Fix podcast a couple weeks ago, said when the Titans are taking on Washington, fire up De'Ami Brown. Your rebuttal was like, he hasn't played more than 5 snaps in his career. Why are we firing up De'Ami Brown? I'm paraphrasing here, of course.
Right.
And Joe's like, trust me, this Titan secondary is horrible. They're susceptible to the deep pass. And what happens this week?
He's the smartest man alive, dude. I told him. I was like, this is unbelievable.
Which, by the way, you call him Joe the Brain Mats. Is that in honor of Bobby the Brain Heenan? Is that a pro wrestling reference right there, or was that something else?
Or is that Pinky in the Brain?
That sounds a lot cooler, but it's actually Pinky in the Brain, believe it or not.
Yes.
Because I'm Pinky, and he's the brain. So
again, folks, win some money this week. Listening to the Daily Fix Pod to Keith and Joe, you can see them live on Thursdays at 9 p.m. Anyhow, let's get back on target here. Let's go to tight ends. Tyler, who you got for us as far as a play this week?
Real quick before I jump into that,
Okay.
it seems there has been real trade rumors of Brandon Cooks.
Yeah. I had heard that this week too.
Teams it's actually being reported by noteworthy sources on Twitter. So the Chiefs, Packers, and Rams have contacted the Texans regarding trading for Brandon Cooks.
So if you can get him in your leagues, right, now is the time to trade for him. That's true, because he's a really good receiver who has done well everywhere he goes. And if it's a team with an upgraded quarterback, he could explode the second half.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that'd be real neat.
Hey,
for Brandon Cooks owners.
Yeah.
Green Bay Packers, are you listening? Just putting it out there. All right, tight end, Tyler, who you got for us?
All right, going a little deeper on this one this week.
I love it.
I'm going Harrison Bryant, who's currently
Ooh.
the tight end 24. That dude he might get 10, 11, 12, 13 targets this week. He's going to get a lot of targets. He's going to play the David Njoku rule.
Oh, I love this. This will be on the podcast. Go ahead. Keep telling me, man.
Kevin Stefanski loves his tight ends, man. He builds his offense around working with these tight ends, and that might change with Deshaun Watson, but that has not changed with Jacoby Brissett. David Njoku has been a massive part of this offense. Once they started figuring out how to run this offense with Brissett, from week 3 on, and that includes last week where Njoku didn't even make it to the second half. Njoku's the tight end 3 overall. He's only 8 points behind Mark Andrews. He has been incredible.
Yeah, no, he's been unreal. Since week 1, I think he's the number 2 tight end in football since week 1, because he had no points week 1.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, Njoku's been really good. Harrison Bryant is not David Njoku. David Njoku is an athletic freak, but he is going to get volume. He is going to get near double-digit targets, and I cannot imagine him finishing worse than the tight end 24, because all the Browns have catching the ball is Amari Cooper. And add on to that the only other Browns viable tight end, Pharaoh Brown, left Sunday's game with injury and might not play this week.
I'm stealing this, just so you know. And for people who do not know,
have at it.
Tyler is a Browns fan, and I always tell people, fans no more. Tyler was saying the Browns' run defense was bad before people realized it. And literally, he said that on the morning show. And over the next 3 weeks, they gave up 486 yards and 6 touchdowns. So the dude knows what he's talking about with the Browns. I'm serious. I'm going to steal this. I may change my bottom tier or bargain tier tight end. And that's great info right there.
Nice. I like it.
Nice. Let's go now to unless anybody has any other plays, let's go
we have a question, Jorge.
Oh, look at this. Penguin02, thank you very much for watching. Should I trade Pittman for Najee Harris and Goddard in a deep PPR league, 16-man? My starting tight end is Taysom Hill, and he's 3 and 4. Is this a redraft or is this a dynasty league?
And I want to know who his other receivers are. Is a big part of that.
Yeah, if you could put that into the chat, we can help you a little bit better. But we will help you. Just put that info, your receivers, and whether it's dynasty or redraft. And we'll get to that question and answer your question. It's redraft, he says. And then as far as his other receivers, what do you got there? You're looking for Pittman. So obviously you're swinging for upside. Najee has been a huge disappointment for fantasy managers, I want to say. Has been one of the biggest disappointments. His other receivers are Jamar Chase and Juju Smith-Schuster. In your running back situation, I'm assuming you're depleted, but
Yeah, he has to be. He's trading for Najee.
that's
Impressive.
a good point.
Because unless he doesn't have any other running back options, I would say no, because I think you can just play the waiver wire week to week with tight end if you don't like
16-man
the
league.
Taysom Hill. That's true. But I mean, tight end's the one position that you can find. I mean, like I see it in daily fantasy, it's so touchdown dependent. That I just think Pittman, if it's like a 3 wide receiver, or he's playing each week with those other two, you're going to get more points, I would think, out of him week to week than you would, Goddard and Harris. Unless, like what you're saying, his running backs are depleted, and it's a double, whammy for him because he's getting a back he can start and a tight end.
So he has Dameon Pierce and Damian Harris as his other running backs.
Oh, then yeah, I understand it then now. Absolutely. Because Damian Harris may have lost his job altogether. And, Najee, the good thing about him is he does catch passes. And in a PPR league, that does get you guaranteed points, which I know he's been a disappointment, but his floor at least is relatively high each week.
Yeah. And honestly, heck, you're looking at.
Oh, and I forgot about the quarterback change too for Pittman.
In 16-man league, you could probably flex Goddard and Taysom Hill. I mean, Taysom Hill is just a boomer bust play. He's just a guy you put in there when you're looking for a big week. So,
but a real boom play.
yeah. It hurts. I feel like you got to do it.
You got to do this,
especially with the quarterback change. I wasn't even considering that with Pittman. You got Ellinger now throwing to him for it seems like the rest of the year is what they said.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely, make that trade and let us know how it goes. And if you have any other questions, hit us up during tonight's show. We also do a pregame show starting at 9:30 a.m. on Sundays that runs to about 12. That is not our plan. We try to make it an hour show, and people just keep asking questions, and we're here to answer. So Penguin02 over on YouTube, why don't you hit that subscribe button? We'd appreciate it. And we look forward to hearing more of your questions as the season goes on. Okay, let's get into some fades here this week. Let's go back to Tyler again at the quarterback position.
All right. I only got one.
Okay.
But this was an easy one for me. I'm going Dak Prescott against the Chicago Bears. The Bears have been surprisingly good against opposing QBs. They're in the bottom 10 with however you want to look at it. They've given up the fewest points to quarterbacks. They're in the bottom 10 of that when it comes to fantasy points per game. Why is that? Is it because their defense is good? Maybe not. But you know what? Their offense is trash, and they're not going to score any points. So the Cowboys aren't really going to need to score any points. Dak Prescott's coming off injury. It was kind of a get right game for him last week. Micah Parsons is going to give Justin Fields nightmares. He might have 3 to 4 sacks. And the over under on this game is currently set to 42. I'd be hammering the under on this game. I think it's just going to be a Zeke and Pollard show this week, and Dak will just not be necessary in any way. So Dak Prescott being the QB 8 in Fantasy Pros ECR is kind of wild to me right now.
So Keith, you and I were talking a little bit earlier in the show, or earlier off air, as far as the whole Zeke and Pollard situation. And so today, Mike McCarthy said that Zeke did not practice or was not going to practice due to a knee injury. How does this information tie into Tyler's call here for fading Dak this week versus Chicago?
I think there's a good chance it's the Pollard game. It would make a lot of sense for the Cowboys. They're heading into their bye next week. Let's go ahead and rest Zeke. That would give him basically 3 weeks before his next game. To Tyler's point, they're gonna smoke the Bears. The Bears are in for a huge letdown loss after their huge win over New England, which was also on Monday night, short week. And I think Dallas, they understand right now that wins are more important than stats. And until they play a team that can really challenge them offensively, which there's not many with that defense, unfortunately for Dak owners, he's not going to be the fantasy stud we wanted. but they're going to continue to win. So if you're a Cowboys fan, that's great because they're understanding we need to control the clock. We need to use our defense. We got a good run game, and Dak can beat you when he needs to, but we're not just going to fling it for the sake of flinging it.
Right.
Absolutely.
Love it. Let's stick with you here, Keith. Your running back fade this week.
I'm sorry, Jonathan Taylor owners. I know it has been a rough year, but I think it's going to continue this week. He is currently running back 7, and Jorge, you can vouch for this. The Washington run D is stout, man. Like it has been most of the season. If you look at the points per game average, you might see they're in the bottom third of the league for points allowed, but that is a lot due to they have 4 receiving touchdowns, giving up on the year to running backs, and also had some issues with backs catching passes. On the ground, they do not give a lot of room. Just look at this list of backs and their average yard per carry against this Washington team. A.J. Dillon, 3.8 yards. Aaron Jones, 2.9. David Montgomery, the best, 4.5. Zeke, 2.8. Tony Pollard didn't even average a yard, 0.8. Miles Sanders, 3.1. Antonio Gibson, 2.0. I mean, these are some of the better running backs and offenses that love running the ball, and they just don't have any room. And then the bigger issue, obviously, is the fact that they're starting Sam Ehlinger at quarterback versus a defense that we know can get after the passer. The Commanders have 19 sacks on the year, multiple games with 5 sacks. I think Indy's going to try to focus on the run game, but I mean, obviously Washington's going to be aware of this, and they're going to load the box and make it difficult for them. Taylor has 16 receptions on the year, which that's a little bit of an uptick per game from previous years. But the problem is he has 71 yards on those 16 receptions. So it's not like he's killing teams in the passing game. I just don't see him to have the ability like Aaron Jones last week to have a bad game rushing and then still have a great fantasy performance because of his receiving game. I actually think Nyheim Hines is the play this week if you're looking at an Indy running back for like DFS or something, because I do think they're going to need a pass on Washington, and Hines is the better pass-catching back. Unfortunately for Jonathan Taylor, I don't think this is the week he gets going. And again, he's had already this year in other games 54 for a rush total, 71, 42, and 58 after that monster game week 1. Not all of it that's his fault. The offensive line's been bagged. They've been down some, but I think the disappointment for Jonathan Taylor continues this week.
I love it. And that is the type of preparation and research, folks, that you can expect every week on the Daily Fix podcast, as well as all the content here at Fantasy and Frames. That was
it's we're nerds, that's why we were perfect when we saw the Fantasy and Frames with the glass on it. Man, me and Joe are going to fit in well with these guys.
Love it. I am not going to give you as much detailed information for this next one, but I think once you hear my rationale, you'll understand why. And I'm going to stick with this for wide receiver fade. I'm going to stick with this Colts and Commanders game, and that's Terry McLaurin. He's currently the wide receiver 24, so just inside the range we're looking for. Stephon Gilmore, Bill Belichick. It's hard to question somebody who's won as much as Bill Belichick, but how did you let him leave your organization? He gets traded to Carolina, and then in the offseason he signs with the Colts. I'm going to give you some defensive stats here to kind of tie into why I'm thinking you're going to fade McLaurin this week. When targeted by a quarterback, he's only allowing a passer rating of 72.7. I want to say the very worst cornerback in the NFL, according to Pro Football Focus, who I guarantee you probably never heard of, has like a 60-something. And then there's Stephon Gilmore. So he is one of the best. He's one of the elites of the elites. And
true shutdown guy.
He is, and he travels. He doesn't stick to one side of the ball. He's not primarily the left cornerback or right cornerback. He goes wherever the matchup is. And the matchup is for the number 1 wide receiver for the Washington Commanders. They had Tyler Heineke in today's press conference asked, so what's your plan for offense this week? Oh, it's to throw it to Terry McLaurin. He's our best wide receiver. To which I'm like, finally, in the nation's capital, a quarterback with competence who's like realizing they're the best players on the team. Unfortunately, Indianapolis knows that. And while the target volume may be there this week for McLaurin, as it will be probably as long as Heineke is the quarterback, this is not the week to expect a reproduction of what you saw last week versus Green Bay. So I would fade McLaurin. He definitely will be outside your top 24. He may even be on the low end of a wide receiver 3 or flex. for you this week. So definitely temper your expectations there. And with that, let's round out the show with fade at tight end.
All right, Jorge, put it to the test. I have a roster with Terry McLaurin and Brandon Cooks.
Cooks.
Who am I playing? Okay. All right.
Yeah, for sure.
It's Cooks. It's Cooks.
That matchup is juicy
Yeah.
for Cooks.
All right. Where did I put my tight end fade? Here it is. We have Robert Tonyan, who is somehow the tight end 10, according to Fantasy Pros ECR.
To my point about the randomness, man, tight end is rough this year if you don't have Kelsey or Andrews.
I know, but Tonyan has cleared 40 yards one single time. Once. That's it. I mean, I get it. It's Aaron Rodgers' target. He's gotten double-digit targets once this year, but the Bills are giving up the 6th fewest points to tight ends. They're playing really tough against that position. I mean, honestly, I don't have a Keith level of stats here, but there are higher floor and higher ceiling plays that are ranked lower than Robert Tonyan this week. So no, thank you.
Absolutely. Great plays, great fades, gentlemen. Again, if you want to hear more about running backs and quarterbacks and wide receivers and tight ends from the entire Fantasy and Frames family, each and every week we put out an article over at fantasyandframes.com called Fantasy Football Upside, where we look at players that can exceed their ECR rankings. So the players that have the most upside per position. So Keith, I know you tackle quarterbacks. Tyler, you're running backs. And so just head over to fantasyandframes.com on Friday to check that out. Tomorrow, I promise, I've been slacking the past couple weeks, so I promise tomorrow afternoon you will get the starts and sits on offense for week 8, as well as the IDP starts for week 8 also. And then don't forget our IDP Fantasy Football Upside that Nate Markham puts out each and every week. And then we have our Fantasy Football Buy Low, Sell High series that Les Maynard, our newest writer here, puts out every week. So look forward to that. I want to thank Keith for joining us here from the Daily Fix podcast. You can check him out with Joe Matz tomorrow live on our various streams on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, as well as listen to their podcast each and every week. But again, folks, I have, when it comes to DFS, limited knowledge. I listened to their pod. I read all their graphics. I read everything. I listened to everything. I put in $3. I won like $120 last week listening to their picks.
Hell yeah.
They research like nobody's business. Literally, you like money, you like making money. If you're not, listen to them, download, subscribe, follow them on their Twitter page at Daily Fix Pod, the Daily Fix Pod. And thank you very much for joining us, Keith.
Absolutely, man. It's my pleasure. Love the show. Love you guys. Let's win some money this weekend.
Absolutely. And Tyler, as always, it's always a blast talking to you. Make sure you check him out at FF Tyler Heil, as well as listen to our podcast, the Dynasty 365 Pod, which you can find over on Twitter at Dynasty 365 Pod. And of course, make sure you tune in on Sunday morning at 9:30 a.m. We go till about 12 o'clock, which just happens to be the case. We're here to answer your questions, folks. Start sit questions. And of course, we go through the IDP relevant fantasy football relevant players, both on offense and IDP for every single game. So make sure to check us out. And so
maybe another version of the Pacheco or Pacheco game too, as well.
See, if you were watching last week, you know exactly what he's referencing, and he's referencing something amazing. So so tune in this Sunday. And so for Keith, for Tyler, I'm Jorge, and you all have a great rest of your week.